Hello and welcome to the Tennessee Informer. Thank you all for joining us tonight on this special Thursday episode. If you're trying to eat healthy and or just lose weight, and do you think you can trust our government and the so-called approved sources to give you the best advice? What food should you eat? What food should you limit or avoid altogether? Is the food pyramid you've been told to follow really that good for you? What's the truth about red meat intake? What about protein and carbohydrates and fats? Are you getting enough or too much? Can you trust the medical community? Who can you trust? To answer all these questions and more is Dr. Ken Berry, who's joining us live here in the studio tonight. We'll also be covering some current political issues and headlines and a whole lot more. So don't go anywhere, but first, another Trump update. Apparently, President Trump has decided that if you don't buy the whole Epstein list was a hoax idea created by the Dems, then you are Epstein obsessed and are being manipulated by the left. Oh, and now he doesn't even want your support. What is going on? Who is he protecting? And let me just say, I don't think he's hiding anything personally, and I don't think he's hiding anything for his family, but something is going on. And he now calls it a hoax. It's just kind of out of the blue that all of a sudden this is a hoax. Well, so when did he find out it was a hoax? And why hasn't he shown us proof that's a hoax? I mean, I understand that Comey was involved with this, and I understand his Comey's daughter, who's a prosecutor, was involved with the Epstein thing, and I know that there's, I'm sure, still corrupt people in the FBI, and he's only been in charge for 7 months now. But so when did they find out it was a hoax? I mean, it's believable that it could be that things that have been added to, things may have been added to the files. And by files, I don't necessarily mean a list of names. I doubt there's a list of names, but I'm sure there's, if there's victims, there's names that, go with those victims, and things need to be investigated. So I don't know, I don't understand. And I think the thing that bothered me the most about this is his abrupt change, just out of the blue. Who cares about Epstein? Why are we still asking about Epstein? It was so out of the blue, and now he's doubling down on, well, I don't want people's support if they are still interested in Epstein. Something is not right. Something is definitely not right, and this may be one of those cases of where the cover-up, whatever it may be, and like I say, let me stress, I don't think, there's nothing in the Epstein files on him. If there was, it would have been out a long time ago. Same thing with his family. But for some reason or another, he wants this thing gone. He wants it dead. And I don't understand that. But I think his reaction to it is more damaging to his credibility than anything that he could be covering. So I don't know what will happen with this. Hopefully we'll find out eventually. He's also now sending weapons to Ukraine. Some directly, but some apparently are going to go through NATO, and he says we're not paying for them, although we're still producing them. We're also still short on some of these weapons. But the question is this: if it was stupid for Biden to get us involved in this, is it not stupid to stay involved? It's his call now. Ukraine, we don't have a treaty with Ukraine. Ukraine's not even in NATO. So, he gave 50 days? He gave Russia 50 days to make a deal, or he was going to do 100% sanctions, which, sanctions really haven't seemed to hurt Russia all that much. And although these sanctions would be also put on anybody that trades with Russia, I don't see that. That's strange too. Some of those countries he's talking about, he just made a deal with. And now, if Russia doesn't make a deal with Ukraine in 50 days, he's going to put 100% tariff on these countries. I don't know. I like to campaign Trump a whole lot better on this issue than I like than what I'm seeing right now. Anyway, that's our Trump update for the day. Now to our guest, Dr. Ken Berry, author of Lies My Doctor Told Me. His website is drberry.com. Hey, and thank you for coming on. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great, Dave. Thanks for having me.
Well, I appreciate you coming on here. Now, some people may not be as familiar with you, so just give a little bit of a background on what you do and how long you've been a doctor, and then, oh, by the way, are you a real doctor?
Yeah. I am a real doctor. I went to school at the University of Tennessee Health Science Center in Memphis, got my MD, did my residency at St. Francis Hospital in Memphis in family medicine, and initially I was working in the emergency department in Camden, Tennessee, moonlighting as a resident, and then started a small clinic in Camden, which blew up very quickly, and I wound up practicing for 20 years on the Court Square in Camden. And in the early part of those years, I got severely obese and pre-diabetic. And, we live in the South. Things have to make sense.
Right.
And so you don't take your car to a mechanic whose car won't start.
Right.
And you don't go to a hairdresser for a haircut if her hair looks terrible. You also shouldn't take medical or nutrition advice from a fat diabetic doctor. That was kind of my thinking, right?
Right.
And so in my journey to kind of fix my own health, I read literally pounds of medical and nutrition journals, anthropological, paleoanthropological, archaeological, looking at what should humans eat. Because initially when I started trying to lose weight, I followed the American Diabetes Association diet and gained weight, and my A1C got worse. And so doctors always suspect their patients are not compliant. Like I told Dave to stop eating the honey buns and get off the couch, but you come back for your 6-month follow-up, you've gained weight, your A1C is worse. I'm going to suspect you didn't do what I told you to do, even though maybe you did.
Right.
So after my trial with the ADA diet and I got sicker, I was like, okay, I can't accuse myself of non-compliance because I live with me. I knew what I'd been doing. And so that's when I really just dug in to try to figure out what should humans eat in order to not have type 2 diabetes or fatty liver or hypertension or metabolic syndrome.
So what is a proper human diet?
There's about 11 different principles of a proper human diet. But just in a nutshell, a proper human diet is made up of, first of all, real whole food. Now, we need to stop right there, and we need to talk about what is the definition of food. It seems elementary. Most people are like, well, food, it's food. But what is food? Food should be nourishing, right? It shouldn't be inflammatory. It shouldn't cause or worsen disease. It shouldn't contain chemicals. It shouldn't be made in a factory. It should not be processed to the extent that bacteria or mice won't even eat it if it sits on a supermarket shelf for 6 months.
Right.
That's not food. And so I think a lot of people just assume if it's at the supermarket, it's food. Right. And I think that's a false, misleading assumption, and that gets a lot of people in trouble because what's happening is people are they're just trusting the supermarket, they're trusting Kellogg's, they're trusting the government to protect them. And I think that after 2020, we all pretty much understand that you can't blindly trust the experts on anything, really.
Right.
And it's not to say we shouldn't have experts. We should. It's not to say that we should never listen to them. We should. But to blindly trust them, I think those days are over. I think the little dog pulled back the curtain and everybody saw the little man operating the levers and said, oh, okay, so a whole lot of this is theater, isn't it?
Right.
So just like we all now know that it's mostly theater in politics, I want people to understand it's like that in every industry. It's like that in medicine. It's like that in nutrition. It's like that in health.
Well, you're going to make some doctors mad, aren't you?
It won't be the first time, okay? So a proper human diet is nutrient dense. It is uninflammatory. It doesn't cause inflammation. It makes inflammation better. It is ancestrally appropriate. And the analogy I use for this that most people, common sense people in the South will understand immediately. If I ask you, what should cows eat? You're like, grass.
Right.
Duh, right? Why? Why should cows eat grass and not some kind of Purina kibble made in a factory? Because they've been eating grass their entire existence on this planet. It is a species-specific diet for them. It is ancestrally appropriate because every single ancestor ate that. Right? So if tomorrow on CNN some veterinarian came and said, hey, do not feed your cows grass anymore. We found out that it causes colon cancer and increases the risk of heart attack. You'd be like, Okay. And also that guy's got this new cow chow to sell
Cow
you.
chow.
Yeah. And so you're going to have to feed your cows cow chow and keep them out of the pasture because the grass has now been discovered to cause disease.
And it's contributing to global warming.
100%. Yeah. And so when it comes to humans, a lot of doctors, because they don't study anthropology, right? I was an animal biologist before I went to medical school. So I know the difference between a man and a woman. But I also But I also know that every species of animal has a specific diet that if they eat that diet, they'll have optimal health. They'll just naturally be healthy.
Right.
But if to the extent with which you vary or stray from that diet, they'll get sick. Just like when you put cows in a confinement feeding operation and you feed them all of the junk. They feed them leftover Skittles. They feed them just ground up. They used to feed them ground up cows until that's where the bovine.
Mad cow.
Exactly. And so because that made them gain weight fast and put on muscle, but obviously that, cows shouldn't eat cows.
Right.
Cows had already figured that out, but humans, it's all trial and error for us, right?
Right.
And so there are foods that humans have been eating since the very beginning that we're now told, just like the CNN guy that said, hey, don't feed your cows grass, it causes heart disease and colon cancer. There is a food that we've been eating since day one as a species that we're now told will cause heart disease, heart attack, stroke, colon cancer, all kinds of stuff. And that's meat.
Red meat.
Red meat. Yeah, fatty red meat. We've been eating as a species as far back as you can go in recorded time, and even before that. We can tell from a scientific, a medical test called a stable isotope analysis. We can tell what people were eating thousands of years ago just from their bones or teeth. We can look at the strontium and the nitrogen and the carbon atoms in their bones or teeth. And we can tell, were they eating C3 plants, C4 plants? Were they eating seafood? Were they eating red meat? And so there's kind of a hierarchy of how much meat an animal was eating. It's called a trophic level. And the human trophic level is actually higher than wolves and coyotes and foxes. We ate more meat than the wolves. And it's always been that way since we've been a species.
Wow.
And so now, knowing that, and maybe some of the viewers are like, I've never heard any of this. And I understand, because I've been studying this stuff for 15 years. But now knowing that, and you're like, okay, so we've been eating meat since our very first day on this planet as a species. But now we're told daily on CNN and MSNBC and the Wall Street Journal and New York Times that red meat causes cancer, that red meat causes colon cancer, heart disease, dementia, literally anything, impotence. The vegan movies, like, oh, if you eat meat, you're going to have problems with ED. And then when you start to look at the nutrition research they're basing this on, it's all epidemiological research. And if people don't know anything about research, there's certain kinds of research that you can prove stuff with.
Right.
A randomized controlled trial that's double-blinded so that the researcher doesn't know what the patient's getting and the patient doesn't know. So what you're doing is you're removing all the human nature out of it, right? Because everybody's got a motive. Just like in politics, right? Everybody's got an agenda. Everybody's got preconceived notions. They've got beliefs. When you do a double-blinded, randomized controlled trial of something, you can take all of that out. So you just get the answer. But this kind of research that they do in nutrition is epidemiological. And so they'll just pick 1,000 people and follow them for 10 years. And once a year, they'll give them a test called a food frequency questionnaire. Now, if I were to ask you, and this is actually one of the questions on there, how many cups of pork ribs have you eaten in the last 12 months?
Pork ribs?
And how many cups of pork ribs?
I don't know.
So literally you're going to guess. And so all of the data that this scientific research is based on is guesstimate. Because you don't know. I'm a carnivore. And I don't know how many cups of pork ribs I've eaten in the last 12 months because, first of all, I don't measure ribs in cups.
Right.
I just eat ribs till I'm full. And so there's literally no way for the participants in the study to answer the question so that you can then call that meaningful data. But yet they still crunch all that data and then they publish that report either at the Harvard School of Public Health or Tufts School of Nutrition or Loma Linda, California, where the Seventh-day Adventists are. And then it gets reported on CNN and MSNBC and New York Times and all the big media cover it. And you've probably seen the news story, eating 1 egg a day is like smoking 3 cigarettes. That's epidemiological research. And so that kind of research, by definition, and any scientist will tell you this, never can show causation. So from that kind of research, you can never say, if you eat 1 egg a day, that is going to increase your risk of this, that, or the other. You can say there appears to be a small correlation or a small association.
But that doesn't take all the other things into account.
Exactly. So those are called confounders, and they try to level the playing field for all the different confounders, whether you're fat or not, whether you're a smoker or not, how old you are, what else did you eat, and they try to do that. And so in a lot of these studies, they will count a slice of pizza as a serving of meat because it had some pepperoni or sausage on it. That's a serving of meat. Even though it's 90% wheat and tomato sauce,
right,
they count that as that's the kind of foolishness. And it's because most nutrition researchers truly believe in their heart of hearts that a plant-based diet is the healthiest diet. But they've never proven it, and they never will because it can't be true, because we've been eating meat since the very first day. Right? And so there's been, I think if I say, there's a lot of money in politics that muddies the water. And there's a lot of perverse incentives in politics. People want to make a little money off this, a little money off that. People immediately get that, right? They're like, oh, yeah, of course, everybody knows that. But when you tell them that same exact thing goes on in medicine, in pharmaceuticals.
I think people believe it now.
But before 2020, they'd have looked at you like you were from Mars.
Right.
But when I say that same thing goes on in in nutrition science as well. All of the schools of nutrition and dietetics are funded by Kellogg's or General Mills or Kraft Heinz or Mondelez. They literally will give them a $10 million grant to build the school. Do you think they're going to denigrate Kellogg's? No, of course not. They're not going to do that. And so most people are not aware that there's that much backroom dealing going on in nutrition and medicine. And when they find out, they're like, oh, so I can't trust that either.
Right.
And so then that brings you into all of the recommendations that were given, the food pyramid, the My Plate, all that stuff. And then all of a sudden you're like, well, okay, so let's take this food pyramid.
Right.
My good friend Nina Teicholz wrote a book called The Big Fat Surprise. And in that book, she documents in detail where this food pyramid came from. So when the scientists, the actual nutrition scientists, were putting this together back in the 70s, they initially said, we think you need 3 or 4 servings of whole grain stuff a day.
Right.
When they got done with their pyramid they had created, you know who they turned it over to? And people, if you don't believe this, and I don't blame you if you don't know me, they turned it over to the big agri lobbyists and said, here, what do you guys think about this? Literally big wheat, big rice, big corn.
Right.
They said, here, you guys, see what you can do with this. And so it started out 3 to 4 or 3 to 5 servings of whole grains a day. When it came back, it was 6 to 11 servings
Good Lord.
of whole grains a day. And that's you can see that right down at the very base of the pyramid, 6 to 11 servings a day.
You don't have room for anything else.
Exactly, because they wanted to sell wheat, rice, oats, and corn. The lobbyists for big agri. That's who basically took the pyramid that still wasn't great, but it wasn't as bad as it turned out to be, and they just filled it up with whole grains so they could sell more wheat, rice, oats, and corn. That is a literal documented fact.
Right.
And so if you're eating 6 to 11 servings of whole grains a day, like you said earlier, you don't have much room left for anything else.
So if they had given that to Anheuser-Busch, how many servings of beer a day would they recommend?
Exactly right, because that's also made from whole grains.
Right.
Yeah. And so there's so many things. We could just talk for hours about nutrition and how they've gotten it wrong over and over and over. And so I want everybody to approach this, listening to this, with an open mind. But then I also want you to be ready to get out the Google machine or the Chat GPT and start asking it questions. And I want you to document, I want you to verify what I say tonight. I don't want you to blindly believe me either.
Right, right. So that's obviously part of the big lie that they've told us are lies. What are some of the other most dangerous lies we're being sold when it comes to food?
Yeah, so whole grains are a health food. Whole grains are nutrient dense. They're a superfood. Whole grain bread is some kind of magic superfood. That red meat is bad for you. That bacon is bad for you. That bacon is a ultra processed food. Right, think about it. Everybody watching, how do you make bacon? You take a hunk of pork, you slice it up, you put some salt and spices on it, and then you either smoke it or you cure it. That's it. Right. That's all the processing it gets. Right. So if you want to talk about ultra processed, that's everything on the cereal aisle. That stuff is actually ultra processed. It is made in a literal factory, like a pair of shoes or like a car steering wheel, made in a factory. Real food is never made in a factory. Okay, so right off the bat, red meat is a health food. Red meat's not bad for you. That includes bacon. That includes eggs are not in any way bad for you.
So hold on. So and then just playing devil's advocate here, because I've heard you speak before, and I've made some changes, and I do want to say this. Some of you know Richard Archie, and Richard was never a little boy since I've known him. Let's put it that way.
Right. And usually walked with a cane.
Yeah, he was getting that way. Yeah, and I saw him for the first time in a few months. About a month ago.
Yeah.
And hadn't seen him in a long time. Now he'd already told me that he'd been following your plan and how much he lost. But I mean, just to see it, I'm like, wow.
Yeah, and he didn't have his cane, did he?
No, he didn't.
Yeah,
no,
isn't that something? Yeah. And so basically, what Richard had been doing, like millions of other Americans, is he had been slowly poisoning himself with the food-like products, because remember, food has a specific definition, and it's not just something that's on the shelf at the supermarket. So he had been eating all this low-fat, cholesterol-free, very little red meat whatsoever, definitely not any bacon. His wife had never let him have bacon because she loves him, and she was doing what she thought was right, feeding him this low-fat, cholesterol-free diet full of whole grains and full of all this, that, and the other. And Richard was fat and miserable. And he said that himself. I'm not, casting aspersions.
So I got to get you on the record here.
Yeah.
Bacon is a health food.
Let me repeat. Fatty red meat is a health food.
Okay.
Bacon is a health food. It is very nutrient dense. It's full of all of the amino acids, the fatty acids, the vitamins and the minerals that your body needs.
Did you hear that, Mom? Did you hear it?
Eggs with the yolk is a health food. Okay. Now, all of these things are even more healthy if the animal is raised and treated properly.
Right.
If the cow's allowed to eat grass in a pasture and the chicken's allowed to run around and chase bugs and eat the diet that they want to eat, that's even more healthy.
Right.
Okay. But currently we got millions and millions of people who go to the supermarket and that's where they get their food. Many people think that's where food comes from, right? That it just appears there somehow. And so those people, not everybody's going to be able to get grass-fed, grass-finished, pastured eggs and beef right now and pork. I don't think you have to. I think that the cheapest beef, ground beef, that you can buy at the discount supermarket, the supermarket that kind of smells like mop water all the time, that you don't want your neighbors.
But there might be other reasons you don't want to buy from it.
Right, yeah, right. But if the meat's fresh and it smells okay, that is still a health food. Even the cheap beef, okay?
Right.
And so
I shouldn't spend extra money to get the 85% or the 90% lean?
Valid question. So no, definitely you don't want the more lean. You want it. I try to buy 70-30 ground beef. That's my standard purchase. Is 70%
what about
protein.
the fat and all the cholesterol?
Saturated animal fat is good for you. It is not bad for you, okay? There is just reams of anthropological, archaeological evidence. Humans always went after the fattiest animal. They always ate the fat. There's multiple references in Scripture. When there was a big celebration, they never went out and killed the fatty broccoli. They never went out and harvested the fatty wheat. It was always the fatty lamb or the fatty calf.
Right. So but what about the cholesterol? And it's going to clog up your heart, and it's going to do this, and it's going to...
So the entire cholesterol heart hypothesis came from Ancel Keys, who basically believed in a plant-based diet back in the 50s and 60s. He studied 22 different countries in Europe. But the study that he published, and this was observational, remember we talked about the epidemiological research. So he studied 22 different countries, Dave. But when he published his study, it was called the 7-country study. Now, a lot of people might be like, well, what happened to the other countries? Well, that's called cherry picking. He picked the countries that supported his hypothesis, and he just didn't talk about the countries that didn't support the low-fat, avoid the saturated fat hypothesis. And he published that, and he was a very well-respected scientist. He had been working with the federal government for years. He's the guy that came up with K rations for the military. Yeah. That's where the K is, Ancel Keys. Okay. And so he was very entwined with the federal government before he came up with this. And so then in, I think, 1977, he went to the Senate and the Congress, and he lobbied them, and they basically came up with the 1977 guidelines, nutrition guidelines for the entire country. Okay. And now a lot of people will say, well, I don't follow any guidelines. I just eat what I know is good for me. But here's the thing. If your children eat at a preschool or a school, they eat free breakfast, free lunch, or they pay for it, that every bite of food has to be federal government approved. It has to go through basically, well, it used to be the food pyramid, now it's My Plate. That's what they use. And so it has to be federal government approved.
So My Plate, that's the standard now at the schools. So what does that mean?
So they are very aggressively limit saturated fat. They very aggressively, so you can't even get whole milk at a school. It's 2% or skim. Right. Now you can get chocolate milk with sugar in it, but it's 2%. So they've cut the saturated fat out of the milk half, or you can get skim. Or you can always get fruit juice, which is full of sugar. Right. You can always get a Coca-Cola out of the vending machine, which is pure sugar. But they will not let you have full-fat milk in schools unless something's changed.
How long has that been a standard? Since 77?
Since 77, yeah.
You know what? I don't remember seeing more fat kids than I have seen in the last, let's say, 10, 15 years. We didn't have that many in our school.
So you're in your 50s, and I'm in my late 60, and I'm in my late 30s. And so when I was in kindergarten, 56, I'm 56. Okay. When I was in kindergarten, there was one fat kid. Right. And I'm a country boy, so I say it like it is, right? When you were in kindergarten or first grade, how many fat kids?
Maybe one.
Maybe one, right? Yeah. Now go to from 1977 to the present time, every school lunch, every school breakfast has to follow these guidelines, right? Now you go to kindergarten, how many fat kids?
Oh, a bunch of them.
30%. And there's a new study out that they've just started talking about that 1/3 of teenagers in America, 1/3, 1 out of every 3 is pre-diabetic.
I don't doubt that.
One out of every 3rd kid is pre-diabetic in their teenage years in the United States of America. Now, I'm all for winning, and I'm all for being number one. But I don't want to win the obesity race in the world or the diabetes race. Right. I don't want to be number one in that, but we're number one in all those things right now. And so let me talk just a little bit more about who suffers because of the federal guidelines for food. Every hospital patient. If any institution takes $1 of federal funds, they have to feed whoever's in there by the federal guidelines. So every hospital patient, every nursing home patient, every soldier in active duty has to eat according to the guidelines. Right. Now, when my granddaddy was in the Army, he said you could just stack your food up. He said you had to eat square, though. You couldn't but he said you could eat whatever you wanted. Right. But it stopped being that way. Now I've got guys who are friends of mine in active duty now, and they're like, dude, the food's awful. It's terrible. and there's not enough protein. I'm trying to work out and build muscles and be a warrior, be a soldier, and there's not enough protein and there's no fat whatsoever. So I have to basically run on sugar.
Well, I can tell you this, and my time frame in the Army was from the early 80s until mid-2000, 2007. And the food, it did get better over time, but there was never enough. They give you a little bitty piece of meat, and I mean, they give you a little more rice and some gravy, but I mean, I was always hungry.
Sure.
I was always hungry.
Absolutely. And so the problem with the federal overreach, because that's what I think it is. I think the federal government has no business doing things like that. Right. I think it's unconstitutional, but they've been doing it since the 70s. So you're going to have trouble changing their mind that that's not their place anymore. Right. But every single American at some point in their life has been affected by these guidelines. And this is something that RFK Jr. has said that he's going to work on. I've got several friends who are working on that with him at the federal level, and they're going to be coming out with new dietary guidelines later this year, that hopefully are going to stop demonizing saturated fat, animal fat, cholesterol, because these things have been thoroughly disproven. So I told you about Ansel Keys, and people can look into him. But so what happened is they kept trying to verify his theory. They kept trying to prove it, and they kept failing. But they also kept promoting it and recommending it because it was already in the federal guidelines. So what are you going to do? Yeah. Because if you start talking against that as a researcher, guess what you're not going to get from the federal government? Any grant money. Yeah. You're not going to get any grant money.
Pick a topic that applies. Pick a topic
exactly
that applies.
Right. Exactly right. Yeah. And that kind of federal overreach has ruined so many things in America, but it's also ruined our nutrition as well.
So cholesterol. Now, I do know this. For a long time, it was like, okay, you just got to lower. They were just looking at lowering your overall cholesterol.
That's right.
Well, then they finally figured out, well, there's good cholesterol and bad cholesterol.
Right.
And see, what was it? Your good cholesterol is more hereditary. There's not a whole lot you can do to improve that number. You can do some, but not a whole lot.
Right.
But the bad cholesterol, that's what you have to focus on. And oh, by the way, if you don't control that bad cholesterol, that's what clogs up your arteries. That's what's going to, a little chunk of plaque is going to break loose. And, that's what's going to give you a heart attack.
That is what they said. And that is what some uneducated doctors still say to this day. But I'm going to tell you something that a lot of people haven't heard. LDL is the bad cholesterol, and HDL is the good cholesterol. Both of those you can move and manipulate based on your diet. HDL is a little more hereditary, but you still, if you fix your diet properly, you can raise your HDL up to very healthy levels. But I'm here to tell you there's no such thing as bad cholesterol. HDL is good cholesterol. LDL is also good cholesterol. Okay, your body uses LDL cholesterol for hundreds of different things. Your brain is built of fat and cholesterol. Okay, every nerve in your body is coated like an electrical cord. The insulator is wrapped in a myelin sheath that is made of pure fat. Okay, every cell membrane in your body, trillions of cells, the membrane around each and every cell is made of cholesterol. Every cell in your body, the little outer container is made of cholesterol. So we're made of fat and cholesterol. And we've been eating meat since day one on this planet, but now those things are very bad for you. Now, what's happened with that is that the big pharmaceutical companies have made hundreds of billions of dollars selling Zocor, Crestor, Lipitor.
And those are statins.
That's right. And now they've got some even newer drugs that lower your LDL, which is the other good cholesterol, lower it to levels that a normal human body doesn't even have.
Such as?
Such as down in the 30s or 40s, okay? And that's not even physiologically appropriate. Now, when they first started measuring total cholesterol, because used to that's what the doctor would yell at you about.
Right.
As long as your total cholesterol was under 300, that was normal. That was fine. Then all of a sudden they lowered it to 250.
Based on what?
Good question, Dave. I'm still looking for that because I can't find any research that shows definitively that matters at all. Now, keep in mind that just like when Congress is in session, there's actually way more lobbyists in D.C. than there are congressmen, right? When a medical, like the American Academy of whatever kind of medical branch we're talking about, when they meet, the pharmaceutical companies they don't call them lobbyists, they call them drug representatives. But they're there out in force just like when DC's in session. Does that make sense? And they are lobbying aggressively for these drugs. And so the pharmaceutical companies actually can set the guidelines. And that's exactly what happened to the total cholesterol guidelines. Started out 300. The Zocor, they were like, hey man, if you lower that to 250, people will be a lot healthier. And what they actually meant was we'll make a lot more money.
Yeah, they meant we'll be a lot wealthier.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Okay.
Then later they lowered it needs to be under 199. And so the same thing has happened with LDL cholesterol. It keeps getting lower and lower and lower. Now they want it literally under 70, which any normal person, any normal healthy 20-year-old, their LDL cholesterol is not going to be under 70. So how are you going to take somebody who's 50, 60, 70, 80, who's right on the cusp of starting to develop dementia? Remember I told you your brain's made of fat and cholesterol? Right. Now I'm going to start you on this drug that aggressively lowers your cholesterol, and I'm going to put you on this very, very low-fat diet. What do you think that's going to do to your brain?
Yeah, it's going to accelerate the loss.
Exactly, exactly. Same thing has happened to blood pressure. Used to, the cutoff for normal for blood pressure was much higher. No, if your blood pressure was 150 over 90, your doctor didn't bat an eye. It's like, yeah, it's fine, it's great. Then it was, it's down, and now if it's above 120, over 80, they're like, oh, you need a prescription. Now, guess who was at the American Heart Association meeting when that was decided? Because the American Academy of Family Physician, which I'm a member of, they don't even go by the AHA guidelines. They basically said this is more towards putting people on drugs than it is to actually saving people's lives.
So what is a good blood pressure?
If your blood pressure is under 145 on the top number, okay, and under 85 on the bottom number, you're perfectly normal, healthy, and fine.
Has anybody, some of the things that you're saying, has anybody ever put out and said, hey, this Ken Berry guy is a crank, and, here's why? Has anybody ever refuted? Legitimately refuted. So
they've rebutted and they've tried to refute, but never successfully, because I don't just wake up and make up some story and then put it on YouTube. Right. I might have a hypothesis, like I think this, and then I get busy. I start researching. I start pulling the literature, the documents. I start pulling the journal articles, and look. And if any doctor's watching this and are like, no, I can't believe the American Heart Association would say 120 over 80. If anything above that, you need a pharmaceutical. That had to be based on research. No. There was a huge controversy in the medical sphere of doctors just going, where did that come from? And there was no answer. They're like, well, it's a consensus agreement.
Oh, consensus.
That's right. Expert,
kind of like climate change consensus.
Expert consensus. That's exactly right. That's where it came from. That's where the majority of the cholesterol guidelines come from, is they'll have a little bit of research that might show a possible benefit, right, but then 12 gray-haired men in long white coats get in a room and they take a vote. Now, that doesn't sound very scientific, does it? But that's literally how it's done every single day.
So does cholesterol have any role in a heart attack?
So, no. So what causes heart attacks is inflammation in the heart arteries from eating or smoking or drinking inflammatory things or inhaling chemicals. There's lots of things that can cause inflammation. Right. So what your body does is it uses cholesterol kind of like mortar or kind of like spackle. Right. Or kind of like Bondo. It sees that inflammatory lesion in the heart artery, and it's like, oh, that's bad, because that could cause a heart attack. And so then it proceeds to put cholesterol there, and so you'll have a soft plaque, to kind of stabilize that area. And then eventually that plaque calcifies with calcium, and then it's very stable. It's never going to go anywhere after that. So it's basically like Bondo in your heart arteries. Literally, what they did is they would autopsy people, and they would chop up their little heart arteries, and they go, "Ooh, look, there's cholesterol in the heart artery wall. Cholesterol must have caused this heart attack." That's like showing up and your neighbor's house is on fire.
Right.
and the yard is full of firemen putting it out, and then you proceed to get on Facebook and make a post saying the firemen caused the fire at my neighbor's house because they were all in the yard.
So cholesterol hardening and breaking off, and is that?
So it doesn't do any of that unless there's ongoing inflammation
Okay.
from what you're eating or drinking or smoking or somehow being exposed to.
So that breaking off doesn't happen unless you're doing something to cause the inflammation.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
Exactly right.
So now what about, all right, let's talk a little bit about diabetes.
Yes.
The AC1 and
Yes.
all the things. Well, don't eat that, you got to eat this.
Right. So the American Diabetes Association will tell people, there's a PDF handout, doctors print it out from the ADA, and they hand it to you. Oh, you've got type 2 diabetes, Dave. Here, eat like this. That's how doctors do it.
I've been pre-diabetic for about 10 years now, and they've been pushing, hey, no, I don't want it. I don't want to take any. I've already taken a mouthful of meds, and I don't even get a buzz, okay?
Right.
I don't want to take anything
It's not worth
else.
it. I understand. So first of all, your dietary changes that you've already made and that you're going to stick with. Next time you have your A1C checked, you're going to be pleasantly surprised to find that you're no longer pre-diabetic. If you'll listen to me and keep doing what I said and have fewer cheats, you won't have pre-diabetes anymore. And then maybe you can teach your doctor something when he says, "How did you do that?" And you'll tell him, "I ate lots of ground beef, ribeye, bacon, and eggs."
And not taking my aberstatin.
And not taking my statin. That's exactly right, yeah. And so an A1C above 5.6 is pre-diabetes. When it gets above 6.5, that is type 2 diabetes. Now, first of all, let's dispel the myth that if you've got pre-diabetes, and some people call it a touch of sugar, just, it's not bad. Damage is being done while you have pre-diabetes. You're doing damage to your body every single day. Your kidneys, your eyes, your heart, other body parts that we want to keep working, you're damaging them every day. The research is very clear on that, but a lot of doctors act like until it gets to 6.5 and you have full-blown type 2 diabetes, that's when the damage starts. That's absolutely false. And the reason they do that is because there's not any medications that will reverse pre-diabetes. So they have to wait till you're type 2 to say, oh, now you're in trouble. You've got to start taking all these meds. We're going to put you on insulin. None of that stuff lowers your risk. It might lower your blood sugar. It might lower your A1C, but it does not lower your risk of heart attack and stroke. You still are at risk because your blood sugar is constantly high, your insulin is constantly high, and your levels of inflammation are constantly high.
Okay, but diabetes in itself carries risk besides the heart attack and this.
That's right. That's right. You can have kidney failure. You can go blind. You can lose a toe, foot, leg. Impotence, huge with type 2 diabetes. You can have kidney failure. You can have all kinds of failures, liver failure. And then obviously it greatly increases your risk of dementia, right? And so it's super important. If your A1C is even 1/10 of a point above 5.6, you're doing permanent damage to your body every day. Every organ in your body, the ones you love and the ones that you like, you're doing damage every single day. And so I want everybody to stop believing that prediabetes is not a big deal. It is a big deal. It's like saying that a woman has pre-pregnancy. You don't. You either pregnant or you ain't, right?
Right.
You either diabetic or you ain't. So if your A1C is above 5.6, you have early diabetes. That's what you need to think of it as, and damage is being done.
And you said those medicines, if you're pre-diabetic, could lower your A1C.
That's right.
But that's not. You said that's not good enough.
Because that doesn't do anything with the inflammation, and it also doesn't do anything with the hyperinsulinemia. Most people with type 2 diabetes, if you ask them to explain what's going on, they would say, well, my pancreas is played out. It doesn't really produce enough insulin anymore. But that's absolutely false. Now, the reason that they don't know that they have high insulin is because the average doctor doesn't check your insulin level. Okay? Insulin is super important. It does hundreds, if not thousands, of things in your body. One of the things it does if it's high is it makes it almost impossible for you to lose fat.
Right.
For you to burn fat. If you have high insulin, you can't burn fat.
What causes it to spike?
Sugar in your diet.
Oh.
So when you eat that 2 slices of whole grain bread, right? The expensive bread, not bunny bread, but you get that expensive stuff with seeds on the top because you're trying to do right. your blood sugar is going to spike. Immediately your insulin is going to go up to try to pull that blood sugar back down. Now, if you're eating 3 meals a day, all of them are high carb because you're eating low fat, and there's only 3 macronutrients. There's protein, there's fat, and there's carbohydrates.
Right.
That's all you got. There ain't no other choice.
Yeah.
So if you cut the fat way down, all you got left is protein and carbs. Right. And if you eat too much protein, it's not fun. So just imagine eating 3 or 4 skinless, boneless chicken breasts with nothing on it.
Right.
That nobody likes that. Nobody's going to do that long term, right? You got to have either some fat or some carbs to make your meal palatable.
Right.
So you either got to have some fat to go with the protein, or you got to have some potatoes and gravy to put that chicken breast in so it tastes like something that you want to eat, right? And so what people wind up doing when they go on the ADA diet or the AHA diet is they wind up eating very low fat, very high carbohydrate, and they typically get enough protein, but their carbs are too high, so they're eating 3 meals a day.
If their carbs are high, your sugar's high.
So carbohydrates are made of sugar, period. Whether it's a carbohydrate from broccoli or a carbohydrate from a jelly donut, all carbohydrates break down into sugar. Now some, like a jelly donut, is just sugar and starches. It's going to really spike that blood sugar. If you eat a big plate of broccoli, it has carbohydrates, but they're tempered by the fiber, right? So you are going to have a blood sugar elevation, but it's not going to be as high, not going to be as fast. But when so the average person is having to eat 3 meals a day with snacks in between because carbohydrates don't give you sustained energy. They don't keep you full for a long time. And everybody's had the experience of going to the Chinese buffet and eating so many plates of food and feeling like your tummy's going to pop.
Yeah, for 20 minutes.
1 hour later, you're looking for a snack because all the carbs are gone. You already burned them up, right? But when you eat a meal that's full of fat and protein, that tells you that you're full so you don't overeat. And then it also keeps you full for hours, okay? And what our buddy Richard Archie's already discovered, and what you'll discover when you keep cutting the carbs is, you don't have to eat 3 times a day with snacks in between because you stay full for hours after you eat. In fact, most people, when they adopt a proper human diet, after a month or 2 of it, they start just skipping breakfast because when they wake up, they just have a cup of coffee and they're not even hungry.
I couldn't do that. I got to have breakfast.
And then and other people will have their breakfast and lunch, and then they're just not hungry in the evening. They don't eat.
So what's a proper diet?
So a proper human diet is nutrient-dense, ancestrally appropriate, uninflammatory. It does not cause disease. It is full of fatty acids, amino acids, vitamins, and minerals, all of which are essential. You got to have those or you'll die. Right? Okay. So a proper human diet breakfast would be bacon and eggs or steak and eggs. Right? Now, if you wanted to add some berries, add a few nuts, add a little bit of vegetable, that's totally fine. What's not a proper human diet for breakfast? Pancakes, bread, syrup, Cheerios, any cereal. So there. You remember I said there's a definition for food.
Right.
Nothing on the cereal aisle, from the 50-cent box of just utter junk to that, what is it, $7 or $8 a box for that little bitty box that's got pumpkin seeds and other stuff. None of that's food. None of that meets the definition of actual nutrient-dense, nourishing, uninflammatory food. Because every box on that aisle either has wheat, rice, oats, or corn in it, all of which are commodities, all of which are doused in glyphosate at some point during either the growth process or the harvest process. And there's been multiple studies that shows that every bowl of cereal that you put on your child's table has a measurable level of glyphosate or Roundup in it.
Okay, so all right, Roundup. So glyphosate / Roundup,
100%,
same thing.
Yep.
All right, so what does that do to you? I know it's not good, but what does it do to you?
There's no way it can't increase your risk of cancer, okay? But it also, initially glyphosate was being studied as possibly being used as an antibiotic because it kills bacteria. Now, everybody at this point has heard of the gut microbiome, right? Yeah. So when you eat that bowl of whether it's wheat or rice or oats or corn, it's going to have a measurable level of glyphosate in it. That's going to kill some of your gut bacteria, some of your healthy, good microbiome bacteria. It's going to kill them. And so when you're having that bowl of every day, so if you had a bowl a month, it wouldn't be any big deal. right? It's all about exposure.
Right.
The dose makes the poison. But how many kids do we know that they literally have cereal for breakfast, and as soon as they get home, they have more cereal? I mean, literally, they have detectable levels of glyphosate in their bloodstream.
Right.
Because they're eating so much glyphosate. And it's not because their parents don't care, it's because their parents don't know. And that would actually be a good job for a state or federal government, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
To be monitoring stuff like that and saying, hey, it's fine for your kids to have an occasional bowl of cereal, but we've got some research here that shows that if your kid's eating 2 or 3 or 4 bowls of cereal multiple times a day, they're going to be getting a dangerous level of glyphosate.
Right.
Not to mention how much sugar. Because breakfast cereal
it's all full of sugar.
Is sugar. Yeah. But then also, if it's wheat, rice, oats, or corn, doesn't matter, that's full of starch. Now, most people learned in high school biology or health, what does starch break down into? Sugar. So if you have Frosted Flakes, you're having a bowl of sugar with some sugar added to it.
Right.
That's literally what that is.
All right, what about if you had oatmeal that didn't have glyphosate on it?
There is no such thing unless you grew the oats yourself.
Okay. But just oatmeal as it's, is it okay?
So let's think about it. Oats are a grain. They are a grass seed. That's how they're, right? So they are full of starch.
Okay.
And so the instant oatmeal, everybody knows that's junk.
It's full of sugar.
But then a lot of people be like, yeah, but that Quaker oatmeal, that steel cut that you got to cook for 3 days, that stuff's good for you. I know it's got to be good for you.
Right.
No, it has literally as much starch as the instant oatmeal. Now, it doesn't have any added sugar, so it's less bad.
Right.
But in no way is that a health food. In no way is that nutrient dense.
Okay, but you can't eat just meat.
Why not? I've been doing it for over 8 years.
You don't eat anything else?
Every now and then I'll grab one of my wife's Brussels sprouts or something, because she eats a very meat-heavy diet, but she still has some vegetables and stuff. We have a little vegetable garden on the farm. She has some tomatoes and peppers and stuff, but the majority of her food intake is meat and eggs as well. But I'm the type of guy that fattens very easily. The reason I started all this is because I got up to 297 pounds.
Right.
And I'm 6'3", so I like to think I carried it well, but I probably did not. I probably just looked like a big old fat doctor.
This is the carnivore diet that you're talking about.
Yes. And so a proper human diet is not just the carnivore diet. Right. It's a spectrum. Anywhere from a low carbohydrate diet, which is under 100 total grams a day of carbohydrate, that's a low carb diet.
Right.
Then when you get down to about somewhere between 20 and 50 grams of total carbohydrate, that's a ketogenic diet. That's keto.
Right.
Okay. Now, I always have to say this because keto got very popular, and so there's all these keto products at the supermarket, right? So the definition of keto is half your plate, if this is my plate, half your plate covered with fatty meat and eggs with the yolk, half your plate covered with low-carb vegetables, a few nuts, a few berries. That's keto. There ain't no such thing as keto bread. That's marketing. There ain't no such thing as keto cake. Duncan Hines would love for you to believe that their keto cake boxes, that's keto, but it's not keto. There's no such thing as keto pancakes, keto syrup. All that stuff is marketing BS.
Right.
Keto is meat and veg, just like your great-grandmother used to cook for you. Meat and veg, that's keto.
But even Grandma made other things besides.
She did. Now, and so why was there always bread? Why was there always stuffing? Why? Because most of us came from poor Southern families. And in order to make the meat stretch, right? You don't have broccoli helper that you can buy at the store. You have hamburger helper because hamburger was the most expensive thing on the table. You have tuna helper because the fish is the most expensive thing on the table. Poor people sometimes can't afford to just feed everybody a bunch of hamburgers, so they use hamburger helper and they mix in the poverty food that's made of wheat so that it goes further. Your belly's full, you feel like you ate a full meal, but you got robbed of nutrition. Because wheat, rice, oats, and corn are poverty foods. Also, they're commodities, okay? Anything that the federal government subsidizes, back to the federal government again, they don't subsidize broccoli, right? They don't subsidize real food. They subsidize wheat, rice, oats, corn, and sugar. And up until recently, they were subsidizing tobacco.
Oh yeah,
and everybody knows that's not good for you, right?
So the government, we have no use for it, generally speaking, but What role do you think the government should play, like for the USDA and the FDA, as far as, well, let me re-ask this question. What negative role have they played, the USDA and the FDA? I know there's supposed to be agencies that promote health and good eating, but that's not the case.
The entire federal government, their only mandate is to protect the people, right? And so militarily to protect the people. Then at the state level, police power to protect the people. And also to protect people from the overarching greed of corporations. I think there's a role for that in the federal government. But the federal government literally caused the obesity and diabetes epidemics by being bought and paid for by the big ag lobby, the big food lobby. So they got everybody fat and sick and diabetic. And then they got bought and paid for by big pharma, because big pharma's got a pill for every ill. Now the pill never cures, it only treats chronically. You have to take it every day, right? The pharmaceutical industry has only come up with one cure in many decades. They actually came up with a cure for hepatitis C. Okay, it was a round of treatment and you would be cured. You would no longer have hepatitis C. When they went back to the big banks for another round of funding, the big banks told them, and this is documented, you can look this up, they said, this is a really, really bad business model. We don't like this, because when you cure people, they're no longer your customer. Now, this sounds conspiratorial, and I know there's people out there saying, there ain't no damn way that's true.
Oh, I think there's a way. I wouldn't have thought there was a way 5 years ago, but I think there's a way.
This is documented. You can literally look it up and read it yourself. They told them, let's not do that anymore. Let's come up with therapies that are chronic. You take it once a day, once a month, once a week, ongoing, lifelong treatment. And we'll fund that. Because that's money rolling in from now on. But if you start curing stuff, and so do you not think that the pharmaceutical industry as a whole went, oh, okay, gotcha, got it, noted. And so that's the last time that they cured anything, and that happened many years ago. And if anybody doubts me, they can just go to the internet search engine and type in hepatitis C cure banker. And you'll find it, and it won't be on a blog. This is documented in meaningful journalism.
So how were they able to demonize meat and fat, protein and fat?
Yeah. So meat's always kind of gotten a bad rap. There are a lot of religious overtones. There are a lot of religions that really demonize meat, right? Christianity's never been really that way, but a lot of the other big religions, certain meats are forbidden, or in some cases, all meat is forbidden, right? And so you've got that. So carnivore, the prefix is carn, like carnal knowledge, like the root prefix is basically sounds sinful, right? And then you got some religions speaking out against it. You have lots of people who have kind of an immature morality. Who, it hurts their heart if you kill an animal or eat an animal. It just hurts.
I'm talking about more on the health side.
We're getting to that. So you've got kind of this religious negativity about eating meat. And then you've got a lot. So then a lot of those people went into nutrition research.
Right.
Loma Linda, California, the Seventh-day Adventists, they basically run most of the nutrition industry, and they own many of the nutrition journals. And they're avowedly anti-meat.
Wow.
Okay, so they've got tentacles in everything that has anything to do with nutrition. And this is another great untold story that's been told by a few friends of mine in books they've written and in blog posts and other stuff. And so then, if you've got enough lobbyists, big food, then you're going to be able to make the federal government basically do whatever you want to within certain limits. Right. And so now you've got this religious overtone that meat may be sinful, maybe bad, maybe too enjoyable. And then you've got all these other people saying, oh, it's just terrible to kill an animal. And then you've got all these big food companies. Because here's the thing, if I I have sheep on my farm. I raise that sheep, I feed them grass and weeds and nothing else. When I take that sheep to market, I'm going to make a certain amount of profit on that sheep, right? I can never scale that up to where it's a $1 billion corporation. Right. Does that make sense? Right. You can't have a broccoli farm and scale that up to where you're making $1 billion. It's just not doable. You can't do that. What eating real food really does is it encourages local ranchers and local farmers to start raising real food again. And that's why I'm always encouraging people, find a local rancher, find a local lady who sells eggs, find a local farm to buy your produce from. Right. But if you can take wheat, rice, oats, and corn, those commodities, and sugar, also a commodity, and you can make food that's shelf stable, you can have it produced in China, and then it comes over on a cargo ship, and then it sits in a warehouse for 6 months, and then it comes to your supermarket and sits on the shelf for 6 months, and it's still fresh.
Yeah.
Right? You can make $1 billion on that because you basically get the wheat, rice, oats, and corn for free because they're so heavily subsidized that they're way cheaper than they would be otherwise.
You mentioned sugar, and I heard earlier today that I guess Trump was able to convince the food companies to start using pure cane sugar versus corn syrup.
Yeah.
Is that a big deal or not a big deal?
On my Twitter today, I posted a poll. I said, replacing high fructose corn syrup in Coca-Cola with cane sugar. This will A, save the world, huzzah, or B, make no damn difference at all.
Okay, so I'm going to go with B.
B, that's right. Yeah, and about 80% of I had about 3,000 votes when I left to come over here tonight. And everybody, 80% are like, it's not going to make any difference at all. That's not going to make Coca-Cola any healthier at all. It's still just a glass of liquid sugar. That's all it is.
Right.
It's a different form of sugar. A lot of people get confused by this. They think natural sugar is somehow different or magical or healthy. Right. The sugar in honey is exactly the same sugar molecule as in high fructose corn syrup. Honey actually has more fructose than high fructose corn syrup.
Right.
Okay? The sugar in agave nectar sounds very natural, very exotic. That's just sugar, right? A lot of people say, well, no, that's natural sugar. But wait a minute, Dave. Where does table sugar come from? Where does high fructose corn syrup come from? It comes from corn. Is corn not natural? It's just as natural as agave and honey, right? Well, where does table sugar come from? Sucrose. Right. That comes from sugar beets and sugar cane. Are they less natural than honey and agave? All of them are natural. Right. It's just that they raise your blood sugar too high, and that spikes your insulin, and that leads to inflammation. There's no such thing as healthy natural sugar versus somehow synthetic sugar. Now, yes,
it's not really synthetic anyway.
It's natural sugar. It came from it grew from a plant that grew in the ground. Yeah, it's all natural sugar.
Okay. So a healthy diet for a family.
Healthy diet for a family. So, like I said, a proper human diet can be low carb, which still is going to have plenty of vegetables, plenty of fruits, nuts, berries. Keto is going to have a little bit of veg, a few nuts, a few berries, but mainly much more meat and eggs. And then carnivore is just going to be meat and eggs plus or minus seafood if you like that. Right? So in our house, it's me, my wife, and we have 2 kids. Beckett's 6, about to be 6. Bonnie just turned 3. So I'm strict carnivore. I eat beef and eggs. Every day, every meal, I usually eat 2 meals a day. I usually go out and work on the farm, come in and break my fast about 2, 3 p.m. and have 2 or 3 pounds of ground beef with 5 or 6 eggs. And then I might eat a second time that night because remember, protein and fat are very satiating. They keep you full for a long time. So 2 or 3 nights a week when it comes time, maybe 6, 7 p.m. where I might eat again if I'm like, I'm not even hungry. I don't eat again. I'll eat 1 meal a day some days. Wow. Right? Now, my wife is more ketovore, so she eats lots of meat and eggs, loves seafood, but she'll have some vegetables. But there is no bread in our house. Bread is not a health food. Bread is just, it's exactly the same thing as a bowl of sugar. It's exactly the same thing as a bowl of Lucky Charms. It's starch that breaks down into sugar. Bread is not a health food.
And obviously you don't have a problem with A1C, you don't have a problem with blood pressure, you don't have cholesterol issues.
When I was eating the American Diabetes Association approved diet, my A1C got up to 6.1. Okay, that's when I was 297 pounds. Now, the last time I checked it was 5.5. And so the other beautiful thing about the proper human diet is you don't have to portion control. You don't calorie count. You get to do what every other animal on the planet does, Dave. You get to eat until you're full. Okay. Now, to the average human watching, they're like, oh, you should never eat till you're full. right? But think about it. Does the cow in the pasture, does he stop eating when he's like, that's the normal, I don't want to eat too big of a portion of grass. No, every wild animal eats till they're full. And then they go take a nap, or they go play, or they go make love. Only humans are confused about what we should eat, how much we should eat, how often we should eat, how many times should we chew your food. All these questions, and it's like, just eat till you're full if you're actually eating human food.
Right.
You get to eat till you're full.
Cool. I like that. I like, any doctor that tells you to eat bacon and eggs.
And eat till you're full.
And eat till you're full?
Yeah.
Hey,
yeah.
That sounds like a great prescription.
But so a lot of people hearing this will go, well, he don't know me, right? Because I can eat. Yeah, so can I, and so can Dave. But when you're eating enough fat and protein, you're at some point when your satiety hormones, they're like, nope, that's it, you're done. Yeah. And you may have already kind of experienced that, where it's like, well, no. Yeah. Typically, I would eat way more food than this, but I'm full. Just eating the meat and eggs, or just the meat, yeah. I can't eat as much if I'm at the Chinese buffet eating all the carbs. Right. Yeah.
So, I want to talk a little bit about politics and public health.
Yeah, let's do it, because it's all tied together.
So we've already kind of talked about this to a degree, the link between the food industry and political influence and health decisions. I think we've actually already kind of answered that. But, you mentioned something before we started that you wanted to talk about.
Yes.
I think was the pesticides and SNAP.
The SNAP benefits.
Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about that.
So let me first say that out of the 20 members of the dietary recommendation group, kind of the experts that make the decision what goes into the My Plate guidelines, 19 out of 20 had conflicts of interest with big food industry. They were either directly employed by them, or they owned stock in the company, or they had gotten grants from them. 19 out of 20 that's the smart gray-haired people that sit in the room and vote on what we're going to feed the little kids in kindergarten.
Right.
They all had these perverse incentives, and some of them had like 10 or 12 conflicts.
Wow.
Okay. Now let's talk about food stamps, SNAP.
Yep.
So SNAP stands for Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program.
Right.
So the second word I would say is the most important.
Yeah.
Nutrition. So if something's not nutritious, should it be on the SNAP program?
Nope.
Right? So that's why beer and whiskey are not on the SNAP program.
Right.
That's why you can't buy cigarettes or bullets, because they're not nutritious. You can't eat them and get nutrition, right? Well, what about candy and Coke? Do they have any nutrition whatsoever?
No.
But you can buy those with food stamps.
Right.
Yeah. Now, how is that even possible? Because there's another federal program called WIC, Women, Infants, and Children. You cannot buy Coca-Cola with WIC benefits. You cannot buy candy.
Right.
You can't buy any junk food whatsoever. Yeah. Now, I don't agree with all the foods you can buy on WIC.
Right.
Because you can get a lot of bread.
Yeah.
Right. A lot of oats. And I don't think I think growing children need meat to feed their body and their brain. So if we already got one federal program that says, no, you can't use this federal money.
Why would another one be allowed?
Yeah, you can't use taxpayer money to buy Coke and candy. But yet they're like, oh, this is cruel and unusual to tell people on food stamps that they can't buy Coke and candy with this taxpayer money. Because let's be honest, that's what it all boils down to. It's not government money.
Right.
It's taxpayer money.
Absolutely.
Right? That was taken from...
And it's not like our poor in this country are... thin. I mean, we have no shortage of people on food stamps and other programs like that are obese. They're bigger than this table.
30% of kids on SNAP are not just overweight, are obese.
Yeah.
And I'm not yelling at the parents. A lot of parents are busy. They don't know better. They're in technical school, in college, trying to become something. They're not nutrition experts. They haven't studied this stuff for 15 years. And I think a lot of the parents trust the federal government.
Yeah.
Please stop doing that.
Right. Okay?
The federal government is not your friend. They are not here to help.
No.
They're here to take care of their lobbyist buddies and their big corporate buddies. It didn't used to be that way, but it's sure that way now. And so you've got this young family who loves their babies more than anything in the world, but they're on food stamps. And so their babies are literally growing up on a diet of Coke, candy, cereal, junk, and then maybe for healthy, they'll have a whole grain cake for dessert. because they don't know better. They just trust the supermarket. They're not going to sell my kids poison. And they trust the federal government. The feds wouldn't let me use my food stamps to buy beer, so that probably everything I can buy is okay. It's probably healthy. It's probably good for me. They're trusting the government and they're trusting the corporations, and that's going to lead to a healthcare epidemic, which is,
that's where we're at.
That's what we got right now.
Yeah. Well, and then some of that, I mean, I don't know that it's just, that they trust the government. It's just, I mean, we got a lot of lousy parents out there. Just a lot of, I mean, nobody in their right mind thinks that candy, cookies, chips, and soda all the time are good for their kids.
You're probably right, but I can remember back when I was a young parent. I had a little son, and I thought, well, yeah, those aren't really great foods, but they're not that bad. I mean, they're not like poison,
right?
But they are. They're a slow poison.
Yeah.
They're not going to kill your kid quickly, but they are going to cause inflammation. They're going to cause damage. They're slow poison.
Well, plus it's what they get used to.
That's exactly right. Exactly right. And see, Beckett and Bonnie, the first food they ever put in their mouth was scrambled eggs and beef ribs or pork ribs that I'd eaten the majority of the meat off when they had two cute little teeth. And they kept wanting to reach and grab. I would just hand them a rib, and they would clean the rib so thoroughly that when they dropped it in the floor, the dog didn't even want it. So their first foods and the foods they eat every day are meat and eggs, meat and eggs, meat and eggs. So there's never going to come a time when they're like, ew, I don't want to eat meat and eggs. Like the average kid that grew up on a cereal and chip diet, cereal, chips, and Coke.
Right.
They haven't developed their palate, their taste buds. All they know is sweet and salty. They don't know any other nuance of flavors. Right. And so when you do give them a real food, they're like, ew. Yeah. They're like,
it's not sweet, it's not salty. I don't want it.
Exactly right. Absolutely. And so it's not their fault, but it absolutely is their problem.
Yeah. Medical freedom. What do you think is the biggest threat to medical freedom?
So the biggest threat to medical freedom is governmental overreach at both the federal government level and the state government level. But here's why. If Big Pharma, if all they could do is just send drug reps to doctors, right? And say, oh, you need to prescribe this instead of that, doctors would probably still be able to manage and get by. Right? But when Big Pharma's got more lobbyists in Washington, D.C. than any other industry, right? They're going to be able to affect the laws. When Big Pharma's got more drug representatives at the American Heart Association meetings than there are doctors just about, at the American Diabetes Association meetings, and they're able to tweak the guidelines. And then the federal government steps in and says, these are the guidelines we will use. And if you, doctor, don't follow these guidelines, you'll get in trouble.
Right.
Just like back in 2020, there were guidelines that came out. Doctors lost their license because they said this is unethical. You are violating people's rights. Right. They lost their license by being ethical and moral. Yeah. That's how the medical industry, just like government and everything else, has been completely polluted.
And speaking of that, and I think it was around 1986. The vaccine makers were able to get immunity, if I remember. They can't be sued.
Yeah. So if any, and then I want to tie that in with the glyphosate bill that was in front of the state legislature.
Right.
So if the maker of this bottle, if this bottle harmed me, I could sue that maker of this bottle.
Right.
If this water had poison in it, I could sue the maker of this water. Right. If these glasses made me go blind, I could sue the manufacturer. This has been one of the bedrocks of American civilization, even before America in Great Britain, where basically real human law cut its teeth. Right. That's all. If somebody injured you, if they harmed you, they're liable, and you can sue for damages. Yeah. Right?
It goes back to the Bible.
Yes, but now for some reason, the vaccine manufacturers back around 86 were able, through their lobbyists, working with congressmen and senators in D.C., were able to get immunity from lawsuits. And not only that, but they also had the federal government set up a special court for vaccine injuries that has a whole different set of rules than just the regular court that the founders of this country envisioned.
Right.
So it's like a court you'd find in France or Germany.
Yeah.
And you might win in that court, but you're going to get a pittance of the damage that was done to you.
Right.
Yeah. And so the vaccine makers have no liability whatsoever.
Yeah.
How does that even make any sense? What other manufacturer says we have no liability? You can't sue us.
Nobody. There's nobody that I know of.
This is something that the King of England used to do. He would give somebody carte blanche. Just you do whatever you want to do, you're blameless. That's one of the many reasons we said, you know what, let's go across the ocean, let's go over here so we can do things right.
Yeah.
But that form of government is trying really hard to follow us to America.
Oh, yeah.
And to take away the liberty and the freedoms and to give special groups special privileges. That stuff's got to stop. So now here let's come to Tennessee politics. So I've been much more active in local and state politics here in the last 2 years. Yeah. And I have found out that it is every bit as exciting and every bit as filled with perverse incentives and sinners and backroom deals and under-the-table money as the federal government.
Yeah, and we have just as many reptiles. It's just the dollar amounts are a little smaller.
You just basically take a zero off, and that's the Tennessee budget versus the federal budget. Yeah. So there was a bill that was introduced, sponsored by a local senator, that was going to make it a state law that the makers of glyphosate, Roundup, and about 4,000 other chemicals, if they were used on a farm and you used them according to what it said on the label, the EPA-approved label.
Right.
Now, we all know we can trust the EPA to get everything
no doubt.
right.
No, I mean, they're right up there with the FDA.
Exactly, right. So this state senator said that...
Now, who's that state senator again?
John Stevens from the 24th District.
Oh, yeah, that's our senator.
Yes,
that's our senator.
My senator. Yeah. He sponsored the bill out of nowhere and said, hey, we need to give these glyphosate and these pesticide, herbicide companies immunity because we're in danger of losing all of our farms if we don't do this. Literally, not joking. You can look it up. Yeah. Okay, so this was shot down in the state house. They just massacred it.
But it'll be back next year,
probably, unless something changes.
They're doing this in other states, or attempting this in other states. As a matter of fact, I heard
that's
earlier
exactly
today there is a bill in D.C.
Yep, absolutely.
Trying to do the same
this
thing.
is the big glyphosate and other manufacturers. This is their lobbying. He got a lobby package and said, hey, here, and that bill was written for him.
Oh, yeah.
There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. That's how it's done.
Yeah.
You think really that he wants the farmers in West Tennessee to not be able to sue somebody if they give that poor farmer cancer? He followed the label instructions. He sprayed this crap on his farm for 20, 30 years. Now he's got some kind of rare cancer that nobody has. Yeah. Obviously came from the pesticide, herbicide, fungicide. But now he can't sue anybody because of this new state law that had a chance of getting through.
Yeah.
If it hadn't been for some good state house members, that might have got through this session. But you can look for that to come back.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Now, there was another bit of legislation that I was very involved in. I was working with a couple of local state reps. We were going to apply, get the bill passed, and apply for a SNAP or a food stamp waiver so that in Tennessee, taxpayer money would not go to pay for Coke and candy. So any soft drinks, any candy, you could not buy that with taxpayer-funded food stamps.
As it should be.
That passed in the House. But for some reason, the Senate couldn't understand how Coke and candy wasn't nutritious, and so they referred it for summer study. Summer study, yeah. So that got basically bumped a year. So now every kid in Tennessee who's on SNAP benefits, food stamps, for another year they're going to be damaging their body with Coke, candy, cereal, all the junk. Just fill up the cart with junk.
On our dime.
And the taxpayers are the taxpayers. Let me just tell you the full circle screwing that the taxpayer gets. So first of all, they're paying for the child to eat the junk.
Right.
Then they're going to pay for the child when the child develops fatty liver as a child or type 2 diabetes as a little child.
Right.
Now at Vanderbilt, they have a clinic just for type 2 diabetes in children, pediatric.
Good Lord.
And same in Le Bonheur and Memphis. They have a fatty liver clinic that meets for children now. Used to be unheard of. Used to didn't exist. So we're paying for all that with TennCare. Now the child's an adult, and he's already had his first heart attack at 40 or 50. Well, Medicare's paying, TennCare and Medicaid paying for all that. Right? So literally the taxpayer's on the hook from the cradle to the grave for people they've never met. Right? Yeah. But the big food manufacturers are making out like a bandit here at the beginning when with the SNAP benefits.
Right.
Big Pharma's making out like a bandit over here when the guy gets is grown and now he's got type 2 diabetes, hypertension, fatty liver. Now he has to have a leg chopped off. Now he's on dialysis. So big food makes their money in the beginning. Big Pharma makes theirs at the end. The taxpayer gets screwed from beginning to end, and so does the poor little kid who has to grow up and never have a life of vibrant health, because their parents didn't know better. They were busy. They were uneducated when it comes to nutrition. They didn't know. Right. They loved their kids, but they were literally filling up the supermarket cart with this junk. And Big Food is saying, thank you very much. Now, later on, Big Pharma is saying, thank you very much. All the congressmen and senators get reelected, and the taxpayer their taxes just keep going up. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, it sounds about right.
Yeah. Yeah.
A quick question. I meant to ask this earlier in reference to heart attacks. Do we have a higher, and I'm sure we're probably having more with younger people, and set aside the whole COVID thing, because I think that's definitely a contributor, but I'm just looking just at the whole cholesterol claim. And so heart attacks, as far as an increase in number of heart attacks across the population from, let's say, the 50s and 60s to 5 years ago.
Yeah, your risk of heart attack has went up significantly. If you were a 50-year-old man in 1950 versus you're a 50-year-old man now, your risk of having a heart attack is much, much higher.
And kind of lay out why? We're still eating a lot of the same stuff.
It can't be high cholesterol because every doctor's got every patient on a statin, right? So it can't be that.
Okay.
But yet still the rate of heart attack per capita is much higher than it was in 1950. How is that? The rates of obesity dwarf the rates of obesity in 1950.
And granted, we were more active. Everybody was more active in those days. I mean, even me and you were close enough to the same age. When we were kids, we were a lot more active.
Well, see, you're talking like a country boy. And I agree. I was super active as a kid. But let's think about all the kids that grew up in New York and Chicago and L.A.
Right.
They're just sitting in the apartment all day.
I don't know about that.
They might have been running around in the street a little bit, but it's not the activity, because research has been done on that. And we're definitely we're more sedentary than they were in 1950.
Right.
But there's been so much research that has thoroughly disproved that exercise. So let me just say this, break some more brains. Exercise does not help you lose weight. Exercising more will not help you lose more weight. Now, it's good for you in 100 ways, Dave. It's good for you in 100 ways, but it will not help you lose weight.
Wait a minute, don't you have to burn more calories to lose weight?
It has nothing to do with calories. And that's what more and more doctors are waking up to. I was very early when I started talking about this in 2017 and got labeled a quack and a kook by a lot of people. But now more and more doctors are like, it's not the calories. It's the total carbohydrate count. And it's really the simple carbohydrates. The easily digestible sugars and starches, that's what makes people fat. It's not how much you eat, it's what you eat. And you can jog on the treadmill all day long, and if you're eating cereal and cake and Coke and Doritos, you're still going to be fat.
Okay. Well, and back to Richard, I did ask him that, if he was doing anything. And he said, nope.
No.
And of course, Richard's a little older. He's got a few issues here and there. He's got a bad back. So, I knew he wasn't out jogging. I knew that.
Exactly. To my knowledge, he hasn't done any exercise more than what he's been doing for the last 20 years.
Right.
And has lost a significant amount of weight, come off several medications. He gave me permission to share that. Yeah. And has basically reversed his metabolic disease. And he feels better, and he's even spunkier and spicier than he used to be. So I think the state reps and state senators really need to watch out.
They're in
next session.
They're in for a rough year.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, as far as politics, now I know you, and I know you're pretty conservative, very conservative.
Yep.
And we talked about that a little bit. But so what are some other issues that get you really fired up?
Second Amendment. Nobody has a problem with the First Amendment being offensive or dirty or mean, right?
Right.
But a lot of people got a problem. The Second Amendment, that meant this, that, or the other. But I think some recent rulings have made it very clear exactly what that meant. And there's no reason that they put that in the Bill of Rights. That is a bill of personal rights. That's what that is for the citizens. Those are citizens' rights. Right? How come just that second one is about militias or something? Come on. What are you talking about?
Well, I mean, I think they wanted the individuals to have the weapons so they could have militias to defend against a overreaching federal government.
And the Native Americans.
Oh, yeah.
Because they were everywhere when we first got here, right? And they kind of felt like they owned the place because they kind of did. Right? And so we not only had to defend ourselves from governments, that's why most of them came here, was to get away from an oppressive government or an oppressive religion. And then also you've got these people who feel entitled to this land because, they've been here for thousands of years, so they probably do kind of own it. But we wanted it, and so there you go.
Well, but remember, let's not forget now, this tribe stole from this tribe, this
100%.
tribe stole from this
That's
tribe.
human nature, Dave.
Yeah, absolutely.
Everybody steals from everybody.
We just stole it last.
Everybody enslaves everybody. That's that's human nature.
We stole it last, and we did it on a permanent basis.
That's right. And so currently it's us with the finders keepers.
Right.
Exactly right. Yeah.
Right.
So the Second Amendment stuff, I get really fired up about that. In Tennessee currently, I cannot carry a long gun, a rifle or a shotgun, with the intent to go armed.
Right.
Now, I would love to go back in time and talk to Thomas Jefferson or George Washington or even Alexander Hamilton. I'd talk to him and say, do you think, should that be illegal? Do you think a single founding father or mother would say, yes, you shouldn't be able to carry a rifle?
Well, as far as the long guns go, it was, 1989 before
That's
they
exactly
decided,
right.
hey, you
That's
can't
exactly
carry
right.
you can't carry a shotgun in your vehicle. Now, we can, just to clarify here, you can carry... you can have a weapon in your vehicle now.
Or on your property.
Okay, or on your property. But you can't carry a shotgun or a rifle out in public.
Right.
Or a rifle.
So some of our
like
properties on the farm, there's a highway that runs between the pastures.
Yeah.
So if I've got my 22 out in this pasture and I've crossed the road, I'm technically breaking the law as I cross the right of way. Carrying that rifle.
And it's okay where you live.
That's right, because I know the sheriff. Right. But what if somebody doesn't know the sheriff? Or what if somebody is known by the sheriff and the sheriff doesn't like them? And he'll arrest them right there and charge them with that. Because there are sheriffs that don't like certain people. That's just human nature again. Back to that human nature, which is what the founders so brilliantly put in a cage, was human nature. Because they know that anybody in power is going to abuse that power. It's human nature. Me and you like to think, if I was in that position, I would never abuse that power. It's human nature. You can't help it. And that was the beauty of the way they crafted the founding documents.
And we were supposed to have more division of authority than what we have. You were supposed to have, the states were supposed to be a block on the federal government. That's the way it was designed. We've gotten away from that. We got away from that, about 1865, and it only got worse since then.
Exactly right. I totally agree. And also, the U.S. is not a democracy.
That's right. We're a republic.
That's right.
It's the first time, every time I hear this whole democracy thing, just drives me up the wall. So, what are some other things that you're big on in terms of?
Obviously, I'm super involved in anything health or nutrition related. I'm all over, fully supporting of regenerative ranching, regenerative farming. Currently in Tennessee, before they just updated the food cottage laws or the food freedom laws, and so now before all you could sell out of your home kitchen was basically jelly. Or some kind of something like that. Now you can actually sell several different categories of food from a home kitchen, and that's a great way for a household to make some extra money. If the wife or the husband's a good cook and they can make something, they can sell that for money. But it was illegal for them. I mean, just basic things for them to sell. And so I'm going to be working with state reps this next go round. I'm going to try to open up the food laws even more. Why can you not make foods that contain meat in your home kitchen and sell it to your neighbors? What part of that doesn't sound American to me? That is as American as you can get.
Yeah, your neighbors, if they're if they trust you,
they know you. That's right. And there'll be some neighbors you'll be like, do not buy that from them.
Yeah,
you'll know better. You'll know better.
Yeah, I've been to your kitchen.
Exactly. And so I'm working on that. There's so many things I'm going to be working on with. I've befriended several state reps and a couple of state senators, and I'm going to be as active as I can be as a private citizen to get some things put back right, like they used to be, or to make some things right that have almost never been right.
Yeah, well, there's plenty of
those.
Since
the 70s.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, and you can go back further than that on a lot of it.
I know.
And so we've gone over. We're
I'm
going to go a
fine.
little
Let's
further.
go. Let's go.
I got a lightning round of questions.
Okay,
here.
all right.
And so here's my disclaimer. If the question is good, you can blame it on me.
Okay.
If it's not a good one, then I didn't write it.
Okay, got it. Let's go.
Okay. All right, and this is your favorite, ribeye or ground beef?
Both.
Both. Okay, at the same time, right?
Sometimes both, yeah.
Cardio or weightlifting?
Weightlifting.
All right.
And my weightlifting is logs and trees and brush out on the farm. I never go to the gym.
Yeah. Okay, trust the science. Thumbs up or thumbs down?
Thumbs down. And so trust true, properly done science, yes.
Right.
Trust the scientism, no.
Right.
Thumbs down.
Right. It all depends on the science.
That's exactly right.
One food you'll never touch again?
Bread.
Bread?
Never.
Okay.
Because I love it too much. I'm an addict. I would eat too much and get fat.
I do like good bread.
Yeah.
Good hot. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. A politician you'd love to debate on health policy?
Well, there's fewer now since we've got RFK Jr. and some other folks at the federal level. Probably I'd love to debate any politician that thinks that pesticide manufacturers need immunity, or any politician that thinks that you should be able to buy Coke and candy with taxpayer dollars. I'd probably debate any of those guys.
And that was an excellent question, and no, I did not come up with it. Kevin came up with all these questions. Thank you, Kevin. What's worse for your health, a donut or CNN?
That's close, but I'm going to have to go with the donut.
Okay.
That was his, right?
If you could erase one food from the American diet, what would it be? Let me guess.
Coke and Pepsi, soft drinks.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just liquid sugar. There's no benefit whatsoever.
The most dangerous healthy foods are a food that doctors still recommend.
Wheat, rice, oats, and corn.
Okay.
Yeah.
One word to describe Big Pharma.
Corrupt, perverse, repulsive, nauseating. Sorry, I couldn't stick with one word.
In other words, you can't do it in one word.
I can't do it in one word.
I got you.
Yeah.
All right. Kale or bacon?
Bacon.
Wait a minute, hold on. Which
Bacon.
one would you exile to
I don't
another
need to hear
planet?
the rest of it.
Which one would you exile to another planet?
Kale. Yeah. Kale is not a superfood.
Have you ever eaten tofu and survived?
I've eaten tofu, and I don't hate it,
Yeah.
but there's no beneficial nutrition in it.
Yeah. If the food pyramid was a crime, who would be the ringleader?
Ansel Keys and the 1977 committee, who literally said, we don't have time to study this for years. We're politicians. We've got to make a decision. That's a quote.
Good Lord. True or false? Red meat is the real multivitamin.
Red meat is a superfood and a multivitamin, multimineral. It is the proper food. There is no such thing as a proper human diet if it doesn't contain red meat. Unless you have alpha-gal, the tick disease, then you can just eat the poultry and the fish.
Okay. Which is more addictive, sugar or social media?
Sugar, 100% sugar. Because even if the power goes out and the Wi-Fi turns off, you can still feed your monkey the sugar.
Yeah. Is there any reason a human should drink skim milk?
Skim milk is a crime against humanity.
Okay. Would you rather have lunch with Fauci or a vegan CrossFitter?
I'd love to have lunch at my house with Fauci, because when he got in there, we would lock the doors and me and him would have a long, maybe several day conversation that he would not be allowed to exit from until I got some answers from him.
Okay. Is whole grain just code for whole lie?
Yeah, so whole grain is slightly less bad than bunny bread. Being less bad does not make it good.
Okay, so basic white bread is better than whole wheat.
But the basic white bread is worse than whole grain.
Okay.
So that'd be like the difference between an unfiltered cigarette and an organic filtered cigarette. The whole grain bread would be the organic filtered cigarette.
Okay.
Less bad, but still bad.
Okay. If you weren't a doctor, what kind of rebel would you be?
Gosh, who knows? Initially I wanted to be an astronaut, and then I wanted to be a pilot, and then I figured out I could be a good doctor, so I did that. So I don't know. I might be off fighting somewhere.
Now this one I'm going to modify a little bit.
Okay.
The question is, what's the best insult you've ever gotten from a plant-based troll? But I would also add from a so-called medical expert.
That I love it when they call me a quack. I love that because there are quacks in existence. There's no doubt about that. But
Right.
a quack doesn't base what they're talking about on years of research, of nutrition research, anthropology, archaeology, and paleoanthropology. That's not the motive of a quack. They don't do all that work.
Right.
They just make something up. And also a quack's got something to sell you. And you can watch all 1,500 of my YouTube videos on YouTube for free.
Right. Right. Well, let's pull up, if you could, pull up your website there. Kevin, if we can pull his website up and show that to the audience. There's Dr. Ken Berry, Transform Your Health.
Yep, drberry.com.
And you do like a weekly podcast.
I do a Monday night live on YouTube every Monday night. Me and Nisha been doing that for years. And then we have a private community. So if your spouse is not on board with this and you
Right.
need support, you can join our private community, and we charge a little tiny bit of money for that.
Right.
But you don't have to join that. You can get all the content on YouTube for free.
Right.
But if you need that support, we're there for you. And I do 4 hours of live Q&A inside the group extra every single week. So I'm doing anywhere from 5 to 10 hours of live, constantly answering live, unscripted questions
Oh, wow.
every week.
And you've written a couple of books as well.
I have. Oh, our website's got audio on it.
Oh, okay, great.
Yep. So I've written 3 books. The first was Lies My Doctor Told Me, initially self-published, and now it's published by Victory Belt. We just came out with the second edition of Common Sense Labs, and me and my buddy from Nashville, Zane Griggs, wrote Kicking Ass After 50. Because if you're over 50 and you're a man, that's the time for you to be a leader, not the time for you to be in the lazy boy.
Right, right. Okay, great. Any closing thoughts?
Eat your meat. Don't believe everything you see on CNN.
Just reminded me of the Pink Floyd song. Eat your meat. How can you have your pudding if you haven't eaten?
Exactly right.
Well, hey, thanks again.
It's a
Great
pleasure.
to have you on.
Anytime.
Definitely
Anytime.
have you back. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for being with us tonight. Audience, taking the time to watch our program. Please be sure to hit the like and subscribe buttons as well as the notification bell so you never miss an episode. We appreciate your support. Speaking of support, thanks again to Jonathan and Mary League's donation. They make July's programming possible. We really appreciate it. Hey, by the way, it doesn't cost anything to subscribe, so please subscribe and share us with your friends. Check out our audio podcast on iHeartRadio, Spotify, and other platforms as well. Sign up for our weekly newsletter at our website, teeninformer.com. Please find and follow us on X and Facebook. Look for Dave's Raves, which are 2-minute audio commentaries on current events. Another feature coming soon, matter of fact, we'll have our first episode of it this Monday, will be the Reptile Files, an update on the dirty deals done to us by legislators and other elected or appointed officials, state or federal. Constitutional Sheriff's Training online every Thursday in July at 7 p.m. Central. Know what your sheriff should know. Sign up at events.mamacat.org/Constitutional Sheriff's Training for Citizens.
I
Or
love that.
go to Tennessee Conservative News. There's a link there as well. Our guest next Monday will be veteran and defender of our Constitution, Tom Davis, who will join us to explain why he intends to challenge incumbent Congressman Scott DesJarlais in 2026. Hope you'll join us again next time. That's it for now. Good night from Paris, Tennessee, that is.